Hello, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and affectionately known by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series: Recover Ed, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcast aims to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We are glad you're here, and thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone who's listening. This is Hope for the Family, and today we have on Lauren M., and she is going to share her experience, strength, and hope as a loved one of an alcoholic or addict. So I'm going to allow Lauren to introduce herself. Go ahead, Lauren.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here, and I really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Lauren, and I'm part of the family support group through the Magdalen House.
Lauren, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of background information about yourself and what led you to be in the position to be in family support.
Ooh, hope you have a while. Okay, so no, I'm just kidding. Well, I guess it starts, so I'm the oldest daughter of, there's 5 of us in total of all girls. And we grew up with, a mostly single family home. My mom and my dad split up when I was about 9. And I kind of remember it more just because I'm older, I'm the oldest. So, and then my mom got remarried like the next year. And that's kind of when everything changed. She ended up having my 2 younger sisters with him. And he was my dad's a musician and was traveling with the band and stuff, and super nice guy, great guy, but they just, weren't meant to be. And she met a guy at church, actually. He, had multiple degrees and masters and went to Berkeley and all this, and just seemed like kind of the perfect guy. And turns out that he was just not that. I'll fast forward, but basically he struggled with, a lot of substance abuse, probably some other issues. I'm can't diagnose him, but I'm assuming some mental health issues. And they had a really toxic relationship, just a lot of codependency and a lot of manipulation. And I remember just being the oldest, kind of watching my mom try to manage his addiction and trying to hide it and trying to cover and from us, so, and I think as the oldest, I came to know those things were going on probably earlier than my sisters did, just being older. And I kind of like to track him. And once I got a car, a couple of my friends and I would literally try to follow him and figure out where he was. It was a little crazy. That could be a whole book on its own, but so, I don't think we thought, we knew it wasn't good, but I don't think we knew how bad the situation was. I think when you're younger, you just don't have, you don't have the full picture. You don't really know what's right and what's not. And sometimes your immediate environment is always going to seem right. So fast forward later on, he struggles, goes in and out of different treatment centers. And my mom gets sicker and sicker spiritually or, even emotionally throughout that relationship. And I think that's when I kind of started to develop what I would call control issues, to say the least. So I kind of would try to protect my sisters and try to hide everything from the people that we were, we all were in volleyball and extracurriculars. And we looked like the perfect family from the outside. And it was like a big pretense to try to keep up with that facade. So, and we didn't know better. We were just all scared, and nobody, we didn't want to tell on my mom. We didn't want to get our family reputation hurt. We didn't want our friends to not be able to come spend the night. So I think eventually I remember couple of my best friends started to notice the stuff with my stepdad, and just kind of like all the things going on at our house. There was a lot of craziness, and I'll just leave it. Won't get too specific there, but there was just a lot of different things going on that were pretty obviously unhealthy to an outsider. And I just started staying at a good friend of mine's house all the time. So I would go there on weekends. I would just escape as much as I could because I just couldn't handle the home life there. Fast forward a lot of years. I mean, I moved out and I kind of always felt bad for leaving my sisters in that situation. Like I should have taken them. That took me a lot of years to move past, that I felt like I kind of abandoned them there, knowing that they were in a pretty dangerous situation, just physically and mentally, just really dangerous situation. So I ended up moving out later and had a whole other journey, just a whole bunch of other stuff that happened, and too long for the podcast, but was in a car accident and ended up getting a bunch of surgeries when I was I was about 19, and kind of had my own stuff going on and really didn't have focus on the family as much. So fast forward, so I'm kind of going through all that. And then after I kind of came out of the fog from all the surgeries, that's just a whole nother thing. But I had my face, reconstructed on one side and was in a lawsuit. And it was just kind of all this. I got so self-involved in what was going on with me. I was young, and I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, Emerson. And I think that is kind of when the page turned for me. I started noticing, I don't know if it was just being a mom, but I just started noticing things going on with my mom and really starting to track her behavior. I think that happens to a lot of people. Just from my experience, I've seen that when you become a parent, you all of a sudden start looking back at all of these things that you were raised, or what, did I get a song saying to me? Did this happen? Did this happen? Things I'd never thought about. And I just became really introspective and just wanting to know about all that, and kind of got more involved with my family, obviously, because I had the first granddaughter and I had the first child of anybody in our family. So it kind of brought everybody together in a way. But it also, me getting more involved in my family brought a lot more light to how bad my mom was doing. And she had declined quite a bit over the years. I know that my stepdad had gone to jail multiple times. I'd kind of distanced myself from a lot of it just for, survival. And I started getting really worried about her. I know she had lost her job, and just some, pretty obvious things were going on. Was going to lose her house, looked really bad, didn't look like she was taking care of herself. And so I started to worry. And then that's when it kind of became more of an obsession, was seeing how, it started with a concern and then it just progressed just like anything else. And it just became where I was dropping by her house and seeing if she was there and how she, was she paying her bills? Did she look okay? How's she doing? And it just became this kind of obsession of mine. And I was taking classes at the time in psychology, and I was in my senior year. I had started later, but I had a professor that I had confided in, that a group of us had gotten pretty close with, and she suggested an intervention. And that's kind of where everything really started. But I got it in my head that an intervention was a great idea, and that I would lead it, and that I would talk to my grandmother, who was kind of in charge of the financial aspects of my mom's life, really, and get her on board. And so I did that. I called the family, uncles, aunts, all of my mom's brothers and sisters, my grandma, my sisters, everybody was on board, and we got an intervention team. They were actually somebody that it was Dr. Phil's. Either way, they were a big deal. But so we hired them, and they came down and they taught us how to do an intervention. They walked us through what to write, what to say, what time we were going to wake her up in the morning, what that was going to look like. I mean, it was a whole thing. We had to go to a hotel and everybody had to prep, and we woke her up at 4 a.m. so that she, I guess didn't have time to use or whatever it was. Oh, and to rewind, I had already taken hair from her brush from her house without her knowing, and got her hair follicle tested, thinking that was totally normal. So totally normal to go do that. And I wanted to have validation before we did an intervention. I wanted to know that what we thought was going on was the truth, or what our version of the truth. So that had all been done before that. So by this time, I'm a full-blown, expert, apparently. So, I mean, I think I'm like part of the Dr. Phil crew myself. I mean, it was crazy. So we had the intervention. She did go to treatment. She didn't really have a choice, to be honest. I mean, we were all there saying that we weren't going to have anything to do with her, really, relationship-wise, unless she sought treatment, and we loved her and we cared about her, all the things, we were all crying, everybody, there was a lot of love in the room, but there was, I think, my mom who wasn't in any way ready for that. At this point, I still don't know that she is or recognizes what's going on with her. And so she did go for about a month, and then she left against medical advice. And ever since then, that's where I learned about the family support group, basically. So they had their version of a family support group. I don't know that it was called Al-Anon. I think it was just a family education class at the treatment center. And I went, I think I was 26 at the time. And that's kind of how it was introduced to me.
So whenever you were talking about following your stepdad as a teenager, now, what was the driving force with that? Was it because you were concerned, or?
I really wanted him out of the family. So I wanted to remove him completely. And I'd been trying to do that for many years. I mean, I called the cops on him at least 10 times and nothing would happen. That's a longer story, but my job was to get him out of my mom's, I guess, get her out of his entanglement. I saw it as my job to kind of help her because I really do believe that she was helpless in a way. Now that I look back, I do believe that she was in a really dangerous and scary relationship. And I think she was really scared and unequipped for that and had a bunch of kids. And I know now that she was doing the best that she could, but growing up, I just couldn't understand it. I was like, what, this guy, she's beautiful, smart, degrees from UT Austin, she was like my idol. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand why she would put herself through that or put us through that. And I got really angry, and the anger just kind of boiled up throughout the years. The more she didn't leave him and the more I couldn't find out about him. He was very good at it, but we had a pretty volatile relationship too, my stepdad and I. So there was a lot of fighting, I stood up to him a lot. I had a very aggressive personality, so I had no trouble telling him exactly where I thought he should go. I don't know. I just felt the responsibility as the oldest. The younger ones some of them were really young and really very much victims in those situations. And as somebody who was like 16 at the time, I was like, okay, I guess it's me. And because we were hiding it from everybody, there was very little people that we reached out to. There was my grandparents who I believe had an idea of what was going on, but not the full picture. And you have a whole different generation of people who they didn't have, education on addiction or even mental health issues. In their day and age, you hid it. You didn't talk about it, and it was sort of looked at as like a bad thing and a shameful thing. So I don't know that, I think we all dealt with it badly. I think everybody, I just think looking back with all this, with hindsight, being 2020, we all had very little, we weren't equipped. Yeah. And everybody thought they knew better than everybody. And it was just a mess.
Yeah, I can see that. It was just not funny to me, but I saw a pattern from like whenever you were younger to then when you were older. And,
it's so crazy because I never saw that until so many bad relationships later. And when I finally married my husband, who is a recovered addict. And I just think how ironic that God is, when he puts people in your life and you're forced to deal with stuff that you probably should have a long time ago. And God is just perfect in the way he does things. So
yeah, no, I'm glad that you said that, because I was listening to some family member talks over the weekend, and I was thinking, I don't know if I would be in this program and do the things that I do if I didn't have this deadly illness that was going to kill me, and then I had to. And so I have like so much respect for the family members who work this program. And that kind of leads me into my next question is, was it hard? What did it take for you to come in and work this program? Like, was it hard being like They're the problem. Why do I need to do anything?
Yeah, that's a awesome question. And I can definitely see how that would be from two perspectives. I can see how you would think, well, what got you in? Because I will always say that family members are some of the hardest nuts to crack. There's just, especially if we have a lot of years of fixing and managing, and if at some point we did that well, like if it worked out a couple times and we thought, oh, well, that was great. I suggested they do this and they did it, or I manipulated my voice, or I yelled, or I followed them or didn't follow them, or whatever it is that we try to do. Sometimes it works. So we get this false sense of, well, I am great at this. I need to be their personal, manager. I would say in answer to your question, what made me, it's the willingness. It's just like, we talk about in the big book, it talks about the desperation of a drowning man. And we are exactly the same in that way. I had to be really desperate. And that was at the point, and I will tell you, there was probably 6 years where I attended random Al-Anon meetings. Just, I would have a bad day or something would be going crazy in my personal life. And I'd go, well, I should really go. And it took me a while to find one that I really connected with, where there was people who I thought were my age or had my experience. And that was kind of tricky. A lot of the groups had children that they were there for, and I had a parent. And so fast forward, once I married my husband, and when we were engaged, he was working a healthy program. He had been in recovery a long time. And I remember when we were dating, I wanted to order a glass of wine at dinner. And I almost did. And then I thought, oh, he doesn't drink. Well, I won't. I thought it was out of consideration. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be kind to him because I didn't need to drink, and it didn't matter to me. I could or couldn't, whatever. But my initial inclination was to hesitate and to accommodate for him. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It's been a long time. It's been about 10 years, but he said, you can have a glass of wine if you want. It's not gonna, I don't want it. And I was thinking, what do you mean? Like, it's going to be sitting right there in front of you. You'll want to grab it, right? Like he's going to try to steal it from me. But it was funny because it was an aha moment for me. I had so much respect for him because he explained it and he said, no, the obsession's been removed. I don't want it. And I don't necessarily like sloppy drunks. So I'd appreciate it if you didn't get really drunk, but it was kind of a really cool moment for me where I thought, this guy is awesome. It was not, his past was in no way a deterrent for me. It made me a little scared, and I thought, oh, am I going to do what my mom did? It just was really kind of weird. And there was a lot of fear involved, but he suggested, I have this Al-Anon group that is aligned with the group I go to. It's in a different room and you could come with me if you wanted. I think it would really benefit us if you went to it. And he kept suggesting it, like, please do this. Because man, as soon as we got serious and started dating and all the frill was gone and the pretense that you do when you're dating somebody, it was like he could see me for all the mess. Just both of us could, but all the controlling I was trying to do. If he didn't text me back at the right time, I already assumed that he had relapsed. Mm-hmm. And everything was about this potential relapse. It was always about that. And I didn't realize it until I started listening to some of the people in the groups that I was attending. And I think that's what really happened. Is it was a very gradual process for me. I was very resistant. I didn't have a relationship with a higher power in any way. I'd gotten so far away from that. So if I thought it was a spiritual program, I wasn't going to do it. So it took me a while. And then there were some people in that room that really just were peaceful. They were talking about their past and their family members like, yeah, I'm okay, whether they're, drinking or not. And I was thinking, what are they, like, what happy pills are they taking? These people are crazy. Mm-hmm. How could you be happy if your family member is not sober? What are you talking about? That's like the ultimate, so it took a long time for me to really grasp, the concepts that they were talking about. And I went and heard a foundation meeting next door from a recovered alcoholic. And that was like the turning point for me. Just hearing, for me, it was hearing their side and hearing what they went through and that it was a disease and that it wasn't something that they could control. So why would I be able to control it?
Right. That makes sense.
It was like it was crazy. It was like an aha moment. I was going, oh my God. So wait, they can't control it. It's not personal, they're not doing it to me. So I guess it was so freeing for me. It took me a while to really get it, but the first time I heard it, I remember like a huge weight being lifted. It's not my responsibility.
So did you think that it was something that they could control, and if they just
Yes,
did
that's
it
a great
right?
question. Yeah, so there was a lot of misconceptions. And I don't think that's uncommon when I talk to other family members, whether I'm sponsoring them or whether it just happens naturally because God is so creative in how he puts people together, So I thought that they had like it was a willpower problem. And I think that's I hear that a lot. I'm definitely not unique in that thought process. I thought I was, but it was, especially if you're a strong-minded person and you've been through a lot, you kind of consider yourself like a warrior. Like, I've been through all of this and I got out of it. And so I don't know, I think we're even worse. The really strong personalities who've deemed themselves, I don't know. It says something like that in the book, how we're all like we were on a battleground together, and you know what I'm talking about?
Well, no, it made me think of this other question. How did you get in touch with the big book? Because I know there's going to be people listening here who say, what's the big book?
I honestly thought it was a cult. I thought I had walked into a cult, that they were taking like Prozac. I mean, I'm not even kidding. And I sat in the back and was just like, these crazy people. But the big book, so the first Al-Anon meeting, it was an actual Al-Anon meeting, and it was a big book based Al-Anon meeting. And it was one of the very few at the time. And so they would go through the book and they would read a page and everybody would discuss it. And then, we would go to the next page and discuss, and it was kind of a study. And so it was a great way for me to learn about alcoholism. It was a great way for me to learn. And in my case, it's other issues as well, but alcoholism, I learned that I had so many of the same issues. Like when I was reading the book the first time, I remember thinking, oh, this is exactly my mom. This is exactly my husband. Oh yeah, they are so this and this, they're the actor trying to run the show. And everything I read, I was just like, oh yes, yes. And the second time I read it, like, I think the second time I really went back through it and I had some recovery under my belt, what I would say, family members are recovery, spiritual recovery. And I remember thinking, oh, that's me. That's me. In all the pages, that was, it was like I had just a mirror was put in front of my face and I realized how similar I was. And I was going to say that in the family afterward is chapter 9. They talk about, they said, doctor said to us, years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is to some extent ill. And that page just flew off the page. Like, I just remember the words just like ingrained in my head, because it is a family disease. If you've grown up, like, one of the things I would say is, if the alcoholic or addict is on a roller coaster going around in loops and up and down, you're right there sitting right next to them, trying to put the seatbelt on. Like, you are going through their process. So you're learning to manipulate. You're learning to lie. You're learning to hide. You're learning dishonesty. You're learning fear. All the things that drive, an alcoholic or an addict, they drive us as well. And if not more. And, it's kind of because we don't have a tangible thing that we're addicted to. It's not something I can touch really, or purchase, or, you know what I mean? But so I think that's why it's so hard for family members to understand that this obsession over another person and their sobriety is also something that we need recovery from.
Yeah. So I know what the obsession is for the alcoholic. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know, it's an illness. Alcoholism is an illness of the mind and the body, and there's a mental obsession piece for it. What does the mental obsession piece look like for the family member?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, when we describe it, so if we're talking to newcomers that have maybe never heard about maybe even alcoholism, or, maybe they have never heard that it's a disease, we usually do in our group, we'll do like a little diagram and we'll talk about the mind, body, and the spirit. And we'll talk about it in relation to an alcoholic or addict and what they go, their cycle and how the spiritual experience will cut that cycle. Then we also talk about the family members, and we don't have the body issue, right? So we don't have a physical allergy. We don't have that component, but we absolutely have the spirit and the mind component, where the mental obsession for us will be like, oh, well, I'm just going to send them a text and I'll just send one, it's like, it'll be, how are you? And I mean, I might rewrite it 10 times because I'm waiting. I'm thinking, do they think I'm being controlling? Do they think, will they, and we will go through. I mean, if you're like me as a family member, you have thought this through so many times that it has become something you well orchestrate, right? So then I'll send one. And then if they don't answer in the time frame that I think someone should answer or whatever, which is usually like 1 minute. So I'm thinking like, oh man, okay. Like for instance, can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, awesome. So this is one that I've used before because it was so perfect. It was when I hadn't gone through the steps. I had a sponsor that I had just gotten, but I hadn't gone through the steps yet. So I hadn't seen the relief that provides. But I kind of had some knowledge, I'd been to some meetings. I kind of knew some stuff, but wasn't working it really every day. And my husband went on a business trip and, he had like 8 years of sobriety under his belt, at least. But every time he would go out of town, I would think, well, he's in a different element. He's not with me. He doesn't have me to, save him from whatever, I mean, that's just really what I thought. And if he didn't answer, like one of the times, the example is I texted him and said, hey, how was your flight or something? And he didn't answer me for like 3 hours. And I mean, that was a long time for him not to answer me. And I was thinking, oh my God, all right, well, my mind had gone from 0 to 100 in those 3 hours. And I would even say 1,000. I mean, he was already relapsed on the street, dead. And I mean, it's seriously, it's scary, but he was at the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, his phone didn't have service when he came in. He went to do a workout before his seminar. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see this. That's crazy. It didn't go through. And I believe him. And it happened, a couple of times where it would just be a little bit longer than I thought. And there was always a perfectly reasonable explanation that I would never ask of anyone else. But because I felt like I was in charge of his recovery and his possible relapses, I really thought, well, okay, I'm contacting the hotel. I'm going to call, Chicago PD or whatever. I mean, it was that bad. And it wasn't really until I worked the steps myself with a sponsor, a recovered family member who walked me through the steps for weeks. And it wasn't until then that I really knew that it wasn't about the location. It wasn't about where he was or who he was with or what substance was or wasn't in front of him. It was about his relationship with his higher power. And if that was intact, then he could be anywhere if he had a good reason.
You were saying how you were trying to control his possible relapses. So you hadn't even seen him anyway but sober, correct?
Right. Oh, that's a good, yeah. I met him sober.
Yeah.
So I've never seen him even drink. I mean, I've never, he always was a non-drinker and I kind of liked it. He could be my driver. Just kidding. But, and I wasn't a big drinker, so it was easy. I could take it or leave it. I would drink with friends sometimes, but I didn't have to have it. But I only knew him sober. So I think for me, the big elephant in the room was always, or when you talk about like weight you carry around or things that you really worry about, for me, the knot in my stomach was, will he relapse? And will he ever relapse? I mean, the funny thing is that I thought he never would. I mean, it's not funny.
No, I mean, I get it though, because when I met Wesley's dad, he had really healthy recovery and he was really on fire. And I look back to think how, and I know, like I have personal experience with this disease, but for some reason I thought relapse for him was impossible.
Yeah. I do know. It's like you put them on a pedestal. And I think my first sponsor, who was just amazing, she was just amazing. she was also married to an alcoholic, and she had been for a long time. They had a lot of recovery. So she was just such a strong force for me to be able to lean on and get guidance from and connect me to God, which I did eventually too. But, she would be like, you have him on a pedestal. This impending relapse is going to happen. I mean, it likely will. So you need to get your head around that. And I remember her being kind of like, I kind of didn't want to hear it. I was
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about? You don't know, I mean, I was almost like indignant. And she was right. She didn't have to be right. He may never have relapsed. He did. And he's sober now, but we've been through a relapse in our relationship, and thank God for, my sponsor and being able to have that person who'd been through it to really help me day to day, just guide me. I mean, there was days where we would talk every day throughout that, because otherwise I was going to call friends who hadn't been through it. I was going to tell coworkers, I was teaching at the time, 8th grade, and it wasn't something I could really just go tell everybody, guess what's going on at my house. So it was, I can't tell you the resource that it is to have a recovered family member, somebody who has depth and weight on my side, just like for my husband, his sponsor has depth and weight for him. And that means that they have been through the same experience and come out on the other side. So only that person can help. I can only be helped from a family member who has recovered from that obsession and has been through it. Otherwise, I'm likely to get a lot of really bad advice, maybe advice that's really inappropriate for our situation, and maybe really damaging to our relationship and to, just to add to this. So when you said, when was I desperate enough and how is it different earlier, it was like, I think it was my sponsor who was saying, your husband's spiritual sobriety, or his sobriety could be contingent on, like you could help him if you were well. You could also hurt him if you're not well.
Yeah.
And that was a really like strong, that might be too much responsibility on. But that's not what she meant. She didn't mean that it was in my control. She meant your reactions or lack of reactions or, whatever. If you're in a good place, you're going to help your husband so much, so much more than following him or.
Well, and I think sometimes it would be easy to think, but I am helping him, and this is why I'm doing all these things. And I have so much respect for you all, because you really have to be open-minded enough to know what help looks like, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are some really amazing family members that I've met throughout this journey, and I'm like in awe of their ability, their willingness, to really be open to the process and open to allowing their loved one their own process. Because I think we think that's the same thing. I think we think because, we're married, so that must mean that I own his process, or it's really hard. I think it takes a long time. You have to be willing to listen to others. You have to be willing to learn something new, because it might be completely different than, in my case, 30 years of what I had learned before. And you have to be willing to not be God. And I think that's the biggest thing. We play God in a big way, and maybe people allowed us to. Maybe we were okay at it. And then we realized that God didn't have any space there. So if we keep putting down the pillow for our loved ones, whether that be my mom, my husband, and many, many people that I know that I now know struggle with things, and if you put the pillow down, every single time, they don't have an opportunity to really get desperate.
Did you realize that you were playing God?
No, I didn't believe in God. I mean, it's a tricky thing. There's a chapter in the big book called We Agnostics. And when we went through that chapter in the study, I was like, this is me. I'd been raised very in a religious background, but like I said, the stepdad that I talked about, he was somebody that would quote scripture, that would use religion in sort of a toxic way, not sort of, a very toxic way. And that's kind of my idea of, religion and God at that point. It was like this horrible, well, I don't know what the word is, backwards, just not anything. So I kind of got away from all that. And I will tell you, I'm so grateful, because the fact that this program allows you to be open, you can be any religion as long as you're willing to believe there's power greater than you, as long as you're willing to believe that. And my first sponsor, when we were doing the steps, I guess we were on step 2, and she's like, well, are you God? And I just sat there like, what are you talking about? I mean, it was the weirdest question. Of course I'm not God, And she said, okay, well, if you're not, then are you willing to believe that there might be something else out there, that's kind of intertwining us, or, in charge? And I said, well, yeah, I'm willing. And that was the easiest answer, but it was the biggest answer to the rest of my journey. It was like, okay, well, I just opened up a little bit there. And then she, we did the rest of the steps, and it was incredible, because that ended up being my relationship with God is the strongest relationship I have now. And it didn't exist. I mean, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw myself. Now I go to church. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Not church, but that I go.
I loved talking to you on the phone, and just a few conversations that we have, because I felt like I could talk to you about God the same way I talked to another alcoholic about God.
Mm-hmm.
There's just like a certain, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, there's just that certain type of relationship, I think, and that connection that you have with somebody else who has been through the steps. It was like talking to like somebody else in the program,
Yeah, it is. It is like that. It's exactly like that. But it's so cool, because with this program, and I talk about the program, and if you're new on here and you haven't, seen that or looked at the steps, I highly encourage you to check out even an app, the Big Book app, or you can find it at any, half price books, or there's so many resources, but check it out and read it. And there's so much a wealth of knowledge in there for family members, for everybody really. But with this program, it's allowed me to be truly accepting of the people around me, and not in a conditional way, not in like, only if you're sober, only if you're this, only if you're following my rules, only if you're doing, it. There was always a conditional love that I think I invited people into. And now it's like, I get you, if you're struggling, I may have boundaries around that. I may not allow you too close, or I may not allow you, whatever, those are up to me. But I mean, I'm able to like love, like even my mom, who I adore. And I know that she, still struggles, and that now does not define whether we have a relationship or not. I can still talk to her, and we can have conversations, and she can see her grandson. But there are limitations to that I pray about and talk to my sponsor about and all that. But before, it was an all or nothing. Right. It was, you're sober or we don't talk. I had made such a strong line there, and it was only based on really just fear. I was really just afraid of what that would mean if I brought her into my life, or I was afraid of what I would have to deal with. And to be truthful, it was all selfishness. It was all, when we say selfish and self-centered, when I first started this program, I was like, I am not selfish. I am like a savior. I go around helping, people who don't even ask for help. I'm helping. But I think family members see themselves as saviors, in a way. They are always helping, and they're the ones that maybe provide financial support or emotional support to people who are struggling with addiction or alcoholism. I think there's a certain persona that you develop, like, well, I'm the good guy or whatever. And once you work the program and you really see yourself, and I just keep saying that, work the program. But in the 4th step, you do an inventory. And man, when you were talking about patterns earlier, that's when you really see your patterns. You see where the control started, why it started, how it morphed, how it grew, how it became an obsession, and then it's all so clear in front of your face, and you'd never looked at it. And you're telling a perfect stranger who knows nobody that I didn't know anybody that knew her. And so it was totally anonymous. I knew it wasn't to be shared. And it was one of the coolest points of my growth. I think a lot of people who've worked the steps will talk about that 4th and 5th step as being a turning point. You lose the baggage and you gain a new perspective of yourself, which is so important because you can't have a perspective on a family member if you haven't looked at yourself. You know what I mean? What did I do? What am I saying and doing that's causing things, and really humbling yourself to be able to be open to a different kind of journey.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, actually, there's
Yeah.
two things I want to ask you, and I never know which to ask first. But
Mhm.
I think the first thing that I do want to ask you is you mentioned that your husband did have a relapse. How did that look for you guys? How did
Whew.
your recovery look for during that, and how
Okay,
did it end up working out?
that's a really good question. And I think this is the biggest tool at my husband and I's disposal. Sorry, I don't disposure. What is that? I think it's a tool we use, because it was like the worst thing, that this horrible thing that you think will never happen or you hope doesn't happen, but in the pit of your stomach, you know will probably happen. And it was like it says in the book, it was suddenly. I didn't, looking back, well, I'll just start with how it happened. So I had noticed that he was irritable, and so I think that's one of the first things that I noticed. Yeah. So when we talk about the spiritual, maladies that we're restless, we're irritable, we're discontent as alcoholics, addicts, or as family members, right? So I noticed that he was really irritable. I knew that he was really stressed with work. He just started his own business, and obviously it was going to be stressful. And I worried a lot about that. Just couldn't he handle that stress? How can I alleviate some stress? It was all I worried about, was if he was too stressed. And, inevitably it didn't matter what I did or didn't do, but, or what I said or didn't say, or anyways, but I noticed the irritability, and I noticed his lack of like meeting attendance with his groups and his meetings that he would go to, which was, he was highly involved, sponsored a ton of guys, went to the jail, went to multiple meetings. I mean, he was super involved, and I noticed it sort of declining. And I don't think I was, I was really busy too. So I don't think I really saw it for what it was, but I just saw the kind of decline. He and I were fighting more than we ever usually do. And there was just things like that. And then it just happened one day. I think there's probably more to the story, but this is all I'm remembering. But he went to go, I don't remember where he said he was going, but he never came back. And it was a Friday night. I'll never forget it. But I'd had a really long week teaching, and, I think she was 9 at that time. My daughter was 9. And he never came back. And then he sent me a text saying, "I'm really sorry. You deserve better than this." Something to that effect. Like, "I'm so sorry. I can't help it," or something. It was just, I remember, and I knew exactly what he meant. Like he didn't need to tell me that he was going off, on a bender. He didn't have to say it. I knew exactly why he was apologizing. And then I didn't hear from him for probably a week. And then he started texting me kind of randomly. He would text here and there, and I would, anyways. So that's a 3-month process. That was another long story, but I made the mistake of allowing him to come home. And I'm not saying that that's wrong for anybody, but in our case, it was a mistake. He said that he was detoxing, and he didn't want to go to a facility, and he knew he could detox at our house. And I had never been through this. So I was like, okay, come home. It's his home. And so I allowed him to come home and, quote, detox non-medically, which he needed. So he kind of white knuckled it, which, we call it. But he held off on using all week. And I thought, okay, well, he'll talk to his sponsor, he'll get going back to meetings. And that's what he was telling me. And then he left again. And at that point, I, thank God, had my sponsor. And I'll speak to that a little bit more. But every almost decision, or every thought, or every time I was up all night, or every time I was just obsessing completely about if he was alive, or if I was going to stay with him, or what I was going to do, I would call her. And she wasn't always available, but I'd leave her a ranting message, and then we'd talk later. And I mean, she would connect me to my higher power, God, and I would pray a lot. I mean, that's when I think I was the most desperate for this recovery, was during those 3 months. I was just desperate. I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought I was going to lose my daughter. Maybe what if I allowed, there's so many things you're thinking about. If I let him come back home, could he get us in trouble? Will I lose my job? And just all these things, and as a parent, you want to protect your child, and that comes first. So the second time he left, I went through it with my sponsor for many hours about what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And she didn't give me real direct advice. She let me, choose things, but she helped me connect to God and figure out what that looked like. And I, did not allow him home. And he probably could have broken in, or, he owned the home too. So, luckily he was respectful of me saying, you can't come home. And I don't think he wanted to come home. There's different kinds of alcoholics and addicts. Some want to come home and be messy and right there. Some want to get away and they don't want that side to be seen. And he's like a getaway person. So, I didn't allow him to come home, and I don't think I spoke to him for a couple weeks after that. And my sponsor just kept, I would be crying. I wouldn't be sleeping. I would be just thinking, well, it's my fault if he, dies. And I'm not light about this. This was a very heavy time. There was times where I thought, well, I haven't spoken to him in a week. I wonder when I'm going to get the call, that he's passed away. Anyways, it was really scary. And I will say that was probably some of the scariest, just nights of my life, just staying up, not sleeping and working all day and hiding it from my daughter at the time. And, I didn't want to scare her, and she didn't know much about that. And I didn't know how to tell her that. I didn't want her to take it personally. So, it was hard. And I will tell you that he found a treatment center on his own. He got into a detox on his own. I didn't find it. I didn't research it. I started. Okay. I'm not going to lie. I started researching, and I called my sponsor and I was like, okay, I found 3 and my insurance covers one of them. And and I was ranting. And we are fallible. Even though I had a sponsor and I'd worked a program, I was in crisis mode, and all of my old inclinations of obsession and control came up, and they were free to just, if I had not had a sponsor and had this program, I don't know where we'd be, because I honestly may have let him come home multiple times, and he may have been worse. He needed to get it out of his system. He needed to do all the stuff he needed to do and do all the damage he needed to do to get to his desperate point. And that was scary. It's kind of like a tightrope. It's very hard as a family member. I'm not sitting here saying that it was easy. It was so great. I had a sponsor, blah, blah, blah. It was very hard, but God was there. Day and night, prayer and meditation, day and night. I would sometimes stop after a class. I would have 1st through 4th period. I'd have lunch and I'm teaching 8th graders who are crazy. And I would stop and just meditate and say, God, help me, help my husband, help him come to his sobriety, help him see you, help me trust that, help me trust that you are in control. And it was daily. And when he found a treatment center, it was like the biggest relief. I just bawled, and it could have gone a million other ways. And sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. Oh.
Well, it's just really hard, because I know I will talk to people who that's not the case for them, and it didn't go that well for them. And I will tell you that at any point I could be in those shoes at any point, at any year that could happen too. And I really have so much peace in knowing that God is truly in control. I saw him work with me. I saw him work with my husband. I saw him work with my family. I trust it now. And sometimes it's hard when you don't understand the outcome, And I love your vulnerability too.
No, it's easy to connect with you for sure. What stuck out to me most is how you said he found a treatment center on his own, because sometimes we feel like we need to, or from personal experience too, like that they need our help or something. He was able to do that. He didn't need your help finding a treatment.
It's you have all these thoughts in your head, because if I'm a family member and I'm thinking, okay, well, in our case, he was using other substances. And I'm thinking, well, this person's not in their right mind, so they can't do this. How would they be able to get on a smartphone, Google search? And then my sponsor was so great that night after I had millions of places picked out and I had it all. Okay, he's going to go to detox. He's going to be at detox for 2 weeks. Then he's going to go to this treatment center, which I've heavily researched that is the best for trauma. And, I was like on a roll, right? And she said to me, Lauren, he has a smartphone, right? It has internet. And I go, well, I guess. And I don't know. He could have lost it. Because I don't know. I don't know what hotel he's staying at. I don't know if he's on the street. There was a lot of times where I really did not know his location. I honestly, he either didn't tell me or I didn't know it. And I had convinced myself that he didn't have the ability to do that. And she said, he's been in the program a long time, Lauren. He knows all the phone numbers of the people he needs to call. He knows all the places he can go, free, not free. He knows he's been in them. He's prior to, he has a long history of this. And so in his case, I was crazy in thinking that he didn't have the resources. He had every resource he needed. And I was not it. And thank God, because he got bad enough. I remember he almost didn't go. He was so sick. Just physically sick. And I think he Ubered to the detox. And that's when I first heard from somebody was, hi, is this so-and-so, and they're here and can you come and fill out some, and I'm like, oh my God, he was alive and he was I didn't know what state he was in, but months later, he did a very intense program and he paid for it. And his program is so incredible since that. And that's one thing I will speak to is relapse is this huge, scary monster that family members are just like afraid of. It's like under the bed in the dark and we don't want to see it. But man, his relapse was incredible for him. It showed him areas in his program that he was lacking. It showed him areas in his spiritual life that he was lacking. It showed me where I was lacking. It showed me what I could have done better. It was such a good learning tool. Of course, we didn't see that right away. So if you're listening and you didn't have that experience, or I don't know, but it took us a long time. We had counseling afterwards. And I think one of the biggest things I thought of, when they invited the family to the treatment center and we did like this really cool, like ring of fire thing. I can't remember what they called it, but it was incredible. And they had us sit in the middle and we got to say everything that we felt to the addict, what they did, how it made us feel. It was like this crazy, I don't know that it was right, wrong, or indifferent, but it was really healing because I hadn't had a voice. He'd been doing yoga, meditation, eating clean, and I'm like trying to keep the house together and my brain together and my job. And we didn't get yoga and meditation and
Yes.
we didn't do light therapy to figure out our past issues. I was jealous. I was jealous. I was jealous of his recovery. I was jealous of his peace.
To tell you this, I remember because I was home with Wesley whenever Isaac was in treatment, and they would post pictures on Facebook. And I saw him in the pool, like having a great time. I remember being like, must be nice.
Yeah.
I'm taking care of your son here at home.
Exactly. That's so, I can so relate to that. Like how I'm sounding now is in no way, I was a psycho. When I say I was angry, I had a lot of resentment. I was not sure I wanted him home after. There was a lot of distrust. I really wasn't sure if sober living might be a better option or if maybe, something else. I was all over the place. And there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of, this wasn't like he just came home and everybody was, woohoo, we worked the program, we're so great. A lot of damage had been done on both sides. And it took us a long time. We had a really good spiritual counselor that we saw for about 6 months. And we both had a lot of work to do with our own sponsors to kind of get through some of that. And I will say, this is what I was saying this. If you're a family member and you're listening, it's like I feel like we were so ignored in a way. And I know that's open for me to say, but it's honestly how I felt. Like we've been in this the whole time and I've had no recovery. I didn't get to go take a vacation, which is obviously it wasn't a vacation. It's a lot of work, right?
Right.
But our perspectives are so different, you know, and I think that's so important to see your perspective and see it for what it is. What he was doing was not a vacation. What I was doing was not a vacation. But you just really have to do a lot of work on yourself and a lot of work with God to see that perspective, to be able to look at what he did for work. And, you know, of course we made amends, and, you know, we had a lot of work and we still have a lot of work in our, I mean, we work it every day. I mean, there's days where my husband and I can't stand each other. And I mean, you know, we're both fallible. We're both spiritually sick people, I think, in ways. You know, we both have some crazy stuff in our backgrounds that have brought us to this place. And I think it's perfect the way it is. You know, it's just the program is like just such a saving grace. And God has just saved both of us in this way, you know, and I do know that if a relapse was to happen again, we had some pretty open conversations about that. When he was sober and when he was doing well, I asked him, what could I have done better? You know, we had a really open, it was uncomfortable, but kind of, you know, what would you have me do? What cards should I shut off? How much money should I leave in the things that we never talked about before? And I was faced with that stuff when he was gone without somebody to answer those questions. And so I think it's really important if you are able to have a conversation like that, that's just open, in order to gain some understanding about how that could go. I know that it really helped me because I feel so much more prepared now if that was to happen.
Yeah. I love whenever you said we, as a family member, we feel ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Because as alcoholics, we go in, we learn that we're sick and we're not bad people. And it's like this, you know, it's so healing for us. But in the meantime, and my daughter was very young whenever I was going through my alcoholism and everything. And I always say, even though I was sick, it still hurt her just the same, whether I had an illness that I was acting out on, or whether I was doing it or knowingly or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you said that, because family support now gives those family members an opportunity to get healing and to be heard and to not be ignored. And so I just think that is so great.
And I just got chills.
Me too.
It's like I got chills because it's just been this thing. I mean, I don't know how long I've been in the program on the family side for, I guess, right when I met my husband. And then, of course, a little bit, you know, after my mom was in treatment, but I wouldn't say I was like in recovery. It was just me bopping in and out of meetings, trying to gain more of what I thought was knowledge and education, you know, so that I could control that situation more. I really wasn't working any program until after my husband. So, and then it's like, it all came to fruition. Like, wow. I mean, it just hit me like my family all needs this. Every one of my sisters, my grandmother, all these people who have been hurt through this process, that I feel like if they were given a pass to say, this is not you didn't do this. You didn't do anything wrong that caused this. You didn't do anything. There weren't specific things that you did that caused this. You know, it isn't your fault. And I know these are all like cliche, you know, you didn't cause it, can't cure it, can't change it, whatever. But it's so true. If Dr. Silkworth is the first one to really give this evaluation of what they thought was alcoholism at the time, and he, you know, they're baffled by it. Like, why do these people keep coming in and out? And I mean, I just read that, what page is it on? XXVII or something. Anyways, it's in the beginning of the big book, but they talk about the disease. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, I just didn't know. I mean, I think I'd heard it, but I mean, oh, so that's why they cover treatment centers medically. You know, it was all these things started coming to light. And even the allergy thing was hard for me to understand. It took me a long time to understand the idea of an allergy in that way. And man, it's so good to have, for any family member to have a real understanding of what that looks like from their perspective. So I'm not going to hear about it I needed to hear from a recovered alcoholic, because, oh man, that was so freeing, because I just got their perspective, and that they didn't do it on purpose. They didn't do it to me. Like my husband will talk about, I'm getting all over the place, but my husband will say, I mean, he was out for years when his daughter was younger, and his daughter is the love of his life. I mean, before me, his daughter is the most precious thing to him. He doesn't love anything more than that, except for God now. He would never have chosen that. He would never have chosen that life, and he would never have chosen to hurt her in that way. And that was really big for me to see, and I think I look at my mom like that too. I can give her so much grace now, so much grace, because I know that she didn't purposely stay with this person to purposely make our lives horrible, to purposely then, she was struggling. She was struggling. She didn't know what to do. There were so many issues going on that we didn't understand. And as children of alcoholics or addicts, we just are so in the dark usually. And when we do think we know something, it's like, who knows how we heard it. And there's just a lot of misinformation. And I just will say that I'm just really grateful for not only the education that's provided through a program like this, but the continued support. I know that if my husband relapses tomorrow, that I will have at least, I'm trying to count family support, at least 6 very spiritually connected people who have walked this walk and who can literally let me just cry, or let me pray with them, or they can give me their experience based on what they went through, which is it's like gold. And before this, I would have never had that. So I will say that I thank God every day for my husband, for my mom, for any of the alcoholics or addicts in my life, because I was not okay. I mean, I really just was not okay. I'm such a happier, more peaceful person. This program has been a huge blessing for me. I will never feel like it's a chore. I think it's the best thing we can do is use our experience to help other people. So now finally, all this baggage, it's not baggage. It's like somebody's going to relate to that baggage. Somebody is going to grab onto that baggage and go, oh my God, I have that same baggage. What did you do? It's just such a cool, because it's just like, I wouldn't be me, I mean, I wouldn't be a good mom. I wouldn't be a good wife. I mean, I would be a mess. I mean, if I was going the way I was going, I would maybe be using. Yeah. I mean, I would maybe be drinking. I don't put it past me with my mannerisms and stuff. I might have been on the other end. So I'm really, really, just really grateful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say before we head out?
I think the main things were covered. Just the fact that the program is so important to both of our recovery.
This was so fun. If you do think of other things and you want to have a part 2, I'm totally game for it.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services that we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channel by searching for the Magdalen House.